Ada for kicking my sister out of my family gathering after comment about adopted son. Some people feel that I, a 32-year-old man, should have handled the situation better, but I don't understand how they could be incorrect about me. We aren't as close as we used to be because of some messed up incidents that happened years ago. My sister, 37 female, and I used to be quite close. Jessie, 9, was born while I was a child of a very early age. My ex-girlfriend became pregnant again few months later, much to my surprise. Except that I was certain it wasn't me, since having a kid to care for and provide for had completely eliminated my desire for S, and we learned that it was my sister's fiancé, who is now her ex-husband, who was spying on us from behind our backs. It was very painful. I was in the midst of the worst agony I'd ever experienced, but I tried to push through it for the sake of my child. Due to the fact that I came from a household of half-siblings, I desired for my child to have a good bond with his half-brother, Keith. The fact is that not only were they, my ex and my sister's ex, terrible lying cheaters, but were also horrible parents as well. Neither of them could stop using drugs, and things only got worse from there. Keith was 3 years old when he was taken away from his parents and placed in jail. This particular issue with my sister arose a few years ago, when my ex-husband got sick. She was concerned that Keith would end up in foster care like her, and I didn't want Keith to end up in foster care like me. When he was 6 years old, I legally adopted him before his mother passed away. At first, not everyone in my family was on board with him, but he's the kind of youngster that is difficult not to like, so they eventually warmed up to him and accepted him. My sister, on the other hand, was never like that. She was enraged that I had taken in her ex-kid fiancé's children and brought them into my home, and I was well aware of why it was so bad, but Keith and Jessie were my first and foremost priority. That's how our relationship came to an end. A little picnic at my place was the perfect way to commemorate my birthday, which occurred last weekend. I agreed to let her accompany me because my parents had worked hard to repair our relationship, and they convinced me to do so that we could communicate. Because the three of us are obviously a package deal, I figured she was cool with Keith being around. When I inquired as to how she felt about Keith, my parents assured me that she had no such feelings. As she turned back, I hid from her grasp once again. She was not aware, however, that he would also be attending the event. He couldn't possibly be there, could he? He is a resident of the location. When my sister came, she was angry to see him since he had offended her. I was under the impression that he came here simply to see relatives, she said clearly. He might have easily heard it since it was loud enough, but he was distracted by his brother's game. Angry because my parents had told her that Keith would not be there, my sister reacted angrily, and I was upset when she told me that she didn't want him to be there, expecting me to step in and resolve the situation. Thus, I simply told her that she needed to go and that she was no longer wanted in this establishment. There was a lot of back and forth between her and my mother and father. I didn't want that sort of discourse to take place in front of my children, so I made her leave. After being kicked out of my celebration, rather than making an effort to resolve the situation, my mother believes I was being a jerk to her. Keith is being transported somewhere out of sight as me and her are conversing with each other. But, to my mind, what's the point of us trying to work things out if she still has these feelings for my son? This is still causing some tension, especially because I escalated the situation by pushing her to leave rather than having a genuine conversation with her. Ada? Story 2. Ada for telling my mom that I can't and won't help her rebuild a relationship with her son. I, a 35-year-old girl, grew up in a home that was filled with dysfunction. Everyone places a high value on their reputation and riches, and the only remedy is to prioritize one's own well-being. I'm not even joking when I say this. I have an elder brother who lives in another state, Oliver, 19, male. Everyone adored him, and he was obviously favored as a youngster, but he's been through a lot of adversity, which has caused him to act out a great deal more than usual. My mother had had enough of his misbehavior and kicked him out of the house when he was 16 years old. He's been a resident of my home for around 3 years. In the time he spent with me, he was able to get his act together because I put him in therapy to help him, and I realized that the whole ideal image my family instilled in our minds was what was driving him to deteriorate so drastically. An excellent education, sports participation, and even part-time employment are all part of his life. His mental health is still in the process of being addressed, and he has rough days, but we are making progress. To be really honest, I'm proud of him. In any case, my parents were aware that Oliver was with me, but they had only had a few brief conversations with him during the previous years. I'd want to say it's because of how stressful things have been lately, but I don't believe that is the case. For the love of God, that's your baby. My parents separated a few months ago, which has been a lovely experience for them so far. After all, it should have happened years ago, but what the heck, right? Since then, my mother has been attempting to convince me to allow her to communicate with or spend out with Oliver. This rapid shift isn't good for him, since he is very reliant on stability, and I informed her of this fact. When I started to, she informed me that she was his mother. The more I rolled my eyes and said something sarcastically to her about how wonderful her parents were, the more she broke into tears. She expressed regret for evicting him, but she just didn't know how to deal with a difficult youngster for much longer than she had to. After all, she was not at blame, and so forth. Despite the fact that I didn't feel she was understanding my argument, since I was more upset by the complete perfection she never stopped talking about, even I have problems with that. I allowed her to ramble on. Then I told her straight out that I wouldn't and couldn't help her with Oliver until he indicated he was ready, and even then, I'm not sure I'd encourage him, and that she would have to face with the repercussions of her actions. She seemed relieved to hear this. She came close to calling me a jerk and claiming to be his mother, rather than me, but I chose to ignore her. I haven't heard from her in a very long time, and I'm starting to feel a little down. In my mind, I've been debating whether I have the authority to keep a mother away from her wonderful son, and she has stated as well. Ada, update. Okay, so I'll just go straight to it. After all of your assurances that I was doing the right thing, which I was really questioning, I phoned my mother and informed her that my choice was permanent and that she was not allowed to contact my brother until his therapist was comfortable with it. She wept her heart out, and it nearly made me cry. But I can't bring myself to feel sorry for her. I'm simply sick of her. She still texts me twice a day, but I haven't responded to a single one. I tell her to F off, but I'm dealing with unrelated family matters right now, so I can't. For Oliver, the previous week has been a challenge. Nothing really linked to my mom, but that's the problem with mental health. Even the smallest item may act as a trigger. However, we are working on it. As I said in my last piece, the major thing that is assisting him is steadiness. It's for this reason that having our mother come would be a terrible idea. She'd swiftly flip his world upside down and put him off our timetable. Because of the circumstances, he is still in the early phases of rehabilitation and is not mentally/emotionally prepared to see our mother, who is a major trigger. I don't believe I mentioned my kid, but she's presently watching Frozen as I'm writing this, and all I can think about is, do you want to make a snowman? So please forgive me if I'm not saying this correctly. But yes. I know the answer may have sounded clear to many, but I sometimes feel like I'm going too far since, as much as I love my brother, I'm not his mother. Could be, but that's another story. I had one more thing I wanted to mention. Why am I making his decisions? Isn't he an adult? Yes, technically, but due to his mental health issues, he lacks the mature perspective of others his age. One of the reasons he's in counseling is because of this. Anyway, to those who have DM'd me, here's an update. Nothing major occurred, but be assured that Oliver is my first focus right now. But thank you for being concerned about him.